Picking up in the introduction, giving a reading of Livy on Hannibal. What you see in this picture is, first of all, a Greek-style soldier's helmet of the period, around 300 BC. And the other is a bas-relief of a Roman military ship or warship, ship of war. And the coin below depicts Hamilcar, Hannibal's father, you could say. Picking up in the introduction, the Barcid ascendancy. With Hamilcar and his supporters at the helm, the Carthaginians turned to Spain to build new dominions. Hamilcar's sole office was the open-ended one of general, in effect, generalissimo of all Carthaginian forces, military and naval. But in practice, the Barcids, Barca was Hamilcar's nickname alone, but it is convenient to give his family this name, dominated all the Republic's affairs, like the Magonids 2 centuries before. To restore the city's fortunes, and of course to keep his kinsmen and allies in office, Hamilcar brought wide areas of southern Spain, roughly modern Andalusia, under his control, levying tribute, developing resources like mines, founding cities. One was probably at the site of today's Alicante, and taking care to create a powerful army of Spanish and North African levies, along with foreign mercenaries. Much of the new wealth was in turn redirected to Carthage. When Hamilcar was killed on campaign in early 228, he was followed by his son-in-law, Hasdrubal, as general in Spain and overall leader of the Carthaginian Republic. Other aristocrats found in politic to cooperate with the Barcids for their own advancement. For instance, Hasdrubal, son of Gisgo, a man of vigor and patriotism, who played a major part in the second half of Hannibal's war. Opposition to the Barcid juggernaut rallied round an ex-general named Hanno, whom some writers, not Livy or Polybius, term the Great, perhaps a descendant of the 4th century leader Hanno the Great. But his supporters won few offices after 237, and they must have shrunk in prestige and influence. Hasdrubal, the son-in-law, the new leader of the Republic, extended Punic, in practice Barcid, rule to the river Tagus, maintained an even larger army, reportedly with 200 elephants, and founded the most brilliant of Spanish Punic colonies, which he named Carthage, on a natural harbor on the southeastern coast, New Carthage, to the Romans' modern Cartagena. The Romans, threatened with Gallic attacks, worried that his expansion might further disturb the situation if he reached the Pyrenees. But a simple agreement struck with them in early 225 assured them that Barcid arms would stop at the river Ebro. Serving in Spain under Hasdrubal were Hamilcar's sons Hannibal, born in 247, and 2 younger brothers, and when Hasdrubal fell to an assassin in late 221, the Carthaginians appointed Hannibal as the new generalissimo and de facto leader of the Republic. Like his father and brother-in-law, Hannibal had been elected by the Carthaginians. His brothers and various kinsmen, too, held high military commands, and a non-Barcid aristocrat like Hasdrubal, son of Gisgo, achieved his own high rank in alliance with them. All the available evidence shows Barcid domination of the Republic continuing through the years of victory that followed Hannibal's invasion of Italy. The only recorded opposition, that of Hanno the Great, was as sidelined, the impotent as ever, even after setbacks began to weaken the Barcids' predominance. But once the war was plainly lost from 203 on, it suited all non-Barcid grandees at Carthage to blame it entirely on Hannibal and claim that the rest of the elite had always opposed both it and him. At the same time, Hannibal and his history-writing friends, keen to set his reputation in the best light, insisted that he would have won the war if the authorities at home had sent him proper reinforcements and supplies instead of constantly withholding them out of party spite. Their contemporary, Fabius Pictor, who had family contacts among the Carthaginian elite, in turn told his readers that the Barcids had made themselves independent lords in Spain, and that Hannibal, flushed with arrogance and greed, had launched the war in the teeth of aristocratic opposition. This view of Barcid political relationships and Hannibal's own role in the war continues to be widely held, but is implausible. Rome in the interwar years. The Romans were in an assertive mood after 241. After annexing Sardinia and Corsica, with it they intermittently sent troops over to cow the warlike natives, with middling success. But more important was their interest in North Italy, then called Cisalpine Gaul. Domestic pressures for land grants to poorer citizens caused a vigorous tribune of the plebs in 232, Gaius Flaminius, to enact such grants in Roman-held territory in the north, which in turn antagonized the warlike Gallic peoples in the Cisalpine region. A great Gallic invasion of the peninsula ensued in 225, but was decisively crushed in the Battle of Telamon in Etruria. Then a series of campaigns under leaders like Flaminius, consul in 223, and Marcus Claudius Marcellus, consul in 222, extended Roman control to the River Po, with a fuzzier tone of influence beyond. To strengthen this control, 2 new Latin colonies by the Po were initiated in 218, Placentia and Cremona. As early as 229 to 228, moreover, the Romans extended their influence across another body of water, the Adriatic, to the piratically inclined communities of Illyria opposed the heel of Italy. A powerful expedition involving both consuls with appropriate armies and a fleet imposed terms on the Illyrian monarchy and a measure of influence, often termed the Protectorate, over the coastal Greek cities like Epidamnus and Apollonia. Another large expedition in 219 under the consuls Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Marcus Livius reasserted Roman influence, while a couple of years earlier Rome had intervened in the Istrian peninsula further north. All these activities in turn brought the Roman Republic into formal diplomatic relations with the states of Greece for the first time. Hannibal's War, Causes and Theories. It was after Hannibal became general that the Romans showed a new interest in Spain, prompted perhaps by the broad conquest campaigns which he waged across central Spain in 221 and 220. The previously ignored town of Saguntum on the Mediterranean coast suddenly found it was a Roman protégé, and the agreement with Hasdrubal about the Ebro was equally suddenly set before Hannibal with orders to abide by it. The Romans perhaps supposed that, young and theoretically inexperienced, he would acquiesce in this double démarche by an embassy in 220. And thus save them from needing to notice Spain or Carthage further. They then turned to launch their second Illyrian war. Certainly the Romans seem to have been unprepared for the attack on Saguntum, for they did nothing throughout 219, even though Hannibal took 7 months to capture the city, well after the Illyrian War had ended in victory. Hannibal had treated their démarche as a provocation, noisily signaled that he would reject it, and then besieged and sacked Saguntum, as Livy vividly reports in Book 21. As soon as sailing conditions permitted, in early 218, a new Roman embassy sent to Carthage, significantly not to Spain, to demand that he be surrendered for punishment, a demand obviously unacceptable, or that war be accepted instead. The chief envoy, another Fabius, then duly declared war, to loud acclaim from the Carthaginian Senate. The reasons for the war have been explored from that day to this. Ancient explanations included Hannibal's family-nurtured greed and arrogance, monarchic vices stressed by the contemporary historian Fabius Pictor, a long-standing plan of revenge devised by the Barcid leaders to reverse the outcome of the previous war, the view put by Livy and his predecessor Polybius, and reciprocal greed, mistrust, and fear dealt by both republics, urged by the later historian Cassius Dio. Modern observers hold to a still wider range of explanations. Some stress the economic attractions of Punic Spain to the proverbially booty-hungry Romans. Others highlight the factors of mistrust and fear, and a few argue for the deadly combination of great power, assertiveness, especially by the Roman, towards a state they had defeated, mutual mistrust, and miscalculation on both sides. On this last view, the war has neither planned nor wanted, but a démarche from Rome instead of restraining the Carthaginians, and their new leader fatally aroused them into standing their ground over Saguntum, and, in effect, daring the Romans to respond. The rival military systems. The Romans levied their armies from their own citizens and from the Latin and other Italian states, while their navy was manned largely by crews from their maritime Italian allies. Normally, each consul commanded 2 legions for the main effort, and if necessary, 1 or more praetors could be given a legion apiece for other theaters. During Hannibal's war, many more than the traditional 4 to 6 legions were in service to meet military needs. In 212, there were 25 under arms around Italy and in the Cisalpine Gaul, Sicily, Spain, and elsewhere. And then 10 years later, there were still 14. In 218, a legion, theoretically, had 4,200 infantry and 300 cavalry, and was accompanied by allied horse and foot who could be twice as numerous. A consular army thus could involve up to 25,000 men, though at Cannae the legions were extra large, and the Roman army under the 2 consuls had reported as over 80,000 strong, a number not reached again until the later 2nd century. The demands put on Italy's manpower by such forces and the war fleets were enormous, as were the needs of payment and supply. There was not a lot of tactical or strategic doctrine, partly because there was no professional soldiery. Generals and officers were men with political careers. Soldiers were levied from among ordinary working citizens. Discipline emphasized obedience, cohesion, and stamina, for the goal of a campaign was to crush the enemy's armies and scour his territory to force a surrender. Complex maneuvers and specialized military devices were unusual in a Roman army in 218. Normal battle tactics were to attack with infantry in the center and cavalry on either wing, and seek to defeat the other side with one or more such blows. The enemy, of course, were seeking the same result in reverse. Legionary and allied infantry were protective armor, coat of chainmail or leather, and helmet, carried oblong wooden shields, and used two hurling javelins and the short two-edged Spanish sword. They were arranged in maniples, small units each consisting of 2 centuries, see glossary, and in these lines an array that allowed flexible movement and considerable shock absorption. The army's light troops, wearing less armor, were used to open a battle with skirmishing tactics, and for pursuit after victory. Against a Greek phalanx formation like Pyrrhus's, a division or divisions of closely packed pikemen charging with their pikes leveled and supported by cavalry, the Roman manipular army could have problems, but superior flexibility and the phalanx's own tendency to loosen ranks in charging could turn the tide. Similarly, with the enthusiastic but ill-disciplined mass of the Gallic army, whose onrush could usually be checked by javelins and the light infantry, and then be broken by the legions countercharging with cavalry support. The Carthaginian armies of 218 were made up largely of North African and Spanish levies, with Carthaginian senior officers. In earlier times, the North Africans had been complemented by units of foreign professionals on contract, Greeks, Gauls, and Campanians among them, but the trauma of the truceless war perhaps prompted Hamilcar and his successors to reshape their forces. At all events, Hannibal in Italy, and his brothers and colleagues elsewhere, seem to have had few mercenaries of the old style, except Numidian cavalry and some Spanish infantry. Certainly no Greeks, who still form the elite of Eastern Mediterranean mercenaries. Hannibal filled out his ranks with recruits from the Italian states that joined his side after Cannae. Until the later 3rd century, a Punic army's battle array had been the infantry phalanx plus cavalry, but with troops equipped along national lines and therefore with notable variety of weapons, tactical array needed to be adaptable. Spanish infantry, for instance, used not pikes but a sword, either with straight two-edged type or a menacingly curved version called a falcata. When Hannibal re-equipped his troops after Trasimene with captured Roman arms, as we learn from Polybius, not Livy, and acquired Italian recruits, swordplay in closely ordered lines must have been the rule. If not in manipular formation, then rather like the hoplite array of older Greece. This was not intrinsically superior to the manipular formation. It was not his line array as such that won Hannibal's battles, but his combination of steady infantry with highly skilled cavalry and, whenever possible, some form of surprise stroke. Hannibal's tactical genius, the greatest since Alexander, enabled him, like his Macedonian predecessor, to inflict crushing defeats on larger forces, and at Cannae he established a model of battle with his inspired military planners ever since. Reportedly, even General Norman Schwarzkopf in Iraq. His strategic and geopolitical skills were less fortunate. He invaded Italy without a fallback plan in case the Romans refused to come to terms, could not create a viable alliance system with the defecting Italians, allowed his administrators at Carthage and in Spain to disperse available forces unproductively, and performed far below par in 207, when his brother arrived over the Alps. Scipio Africanus, his admirer and ultimate nemesis, used equally varied and inspired tactics, and was just as charismatic, if not more so, but did not have the problem of building up and then defending a broad alliance system or coordinating the entire national war effort. A further advantage for the Romans was that they had several other capable commanders, though no other genius, like Fabius, Marcellus, Gracchus, and Nero. By contrast, the other Carthaginian generals were definitely second-rate or even third-rate. The one great victory they won over the elder Scipio brothers in Spain, 211, was partly owing to the brothers' own strategic mistakes. The once mighty Punic navy performed miserably throughout the war. Such limitations among the Carthaginians and in their leader himself led to misjudgments and missed opportunities. Hannibal's War. The War of 218 to 201 was conditioned by several factors, including Hannibal's military genius and limited geopolitical skills, Carthage's renewed wealth and lack of a vigorous Carthaginian navy, ironic in view of her centuries of maritime expertise, and the Romans' stubborn resourcefulness under pressure. Like his father and brother-in-law, Hannibal was a land warrior. Punic naval inferiority after 2 decades of Barcid rule practically dictated a land invasion of Italy, unless he were to await enemy invasions of both Spain and Africa. His grand strategy, clearly aimed at inflicting shattering defeats on the Romans on their home ground, so as to win over the Italian allies and press the Romans themselves into a peace on his terms. Victory would, in turn, have made Carthage the dominant power across the Mediterranean West, and, with a subservient Rome and Italy at their side, potentially the arbiter of the East as well. The strategic scheme began less than brilliantly, however. Marching out of Spain with 59,000 cavalry and infantry, Hannibal arrived in Cisalpine Gaul with 26,000. Whatever the reasons, much debated ever since, he had lost nearly 60% of his troops, and though he recruited Gallic warriors, these proved less disciplined and reliable than his lost Spanish and North African effectives. Had he arrived with his original 59,000, all subsequent history might have been different. Yet he won a spectacular series of victories, climaxing at Cannae on 2nd of August 216, when more Romans and allies were killed, on even the lowest estimate, than on the first day of the Somme in 1916. Defections from the losing side began, including the major and discontented city of Capua in Campania, so that by 212 most of the southern Italy states were Punic allies. Moreover, Cannae brought an eastern great power, Macedon, into alliance, for King Philip V disliked the Roman protectorate in Illyria, and by 214 Syracuse too had joined. Rome and her remaining allies were all but encircled. After Cannae, Hannibal expected the Romans to seek peace talks. His treaty with Macedon implicitly forecast that they would be weakened, but not obliterated, contrary to what the Romans later claimed. Instead, they multiplied their armies and maintained their fleets. By 213, more than a quarter of all available manpower was in military service. Armies operated in Spain, and when destroyed in 211 were replaced. Philip V was contained, Syracuse was besieged and taken, and in Italy Hannibal found his grand alliance as much a hindrance as a help. He was shadowed by Roman armies while other armies operated against his allies, who then called for his protection. Despite some further gains, he never won another major victory, whereas his allies were subjugated one after another by the remorseless Romans. Spain was lost by 206 after a spectacular series of victories won by the new and surprisingly young Roman general Publius Scipio. A fresh Punic army under Hannibal's middle brother did make it from Spain to Cisalpine Gaul in 207, but Hannibal was now penned in southern Italy, and his brother's reinforcements were cut off in the far north and destroyed. Hannibal's grand strategy foundered on Roman endurance and resource. This had always been the risk. Every Punic leader knew how the same qualities had taken the Romans through to unexpected victory in the First Punic War. His calculated hope had to be that massive defeats and defections on their very doorstep would produce a different result. When this failed to happen, he lacked a practicable alternative. The enemy refused further pitched battles, finding ways instead to harass and frustrate his army in southern Italy. The Roman general Marcellus grew particularly skilled at this. While reconquering defected allies and simultaneously putting unbearable pressure on Carthage's supporters elsewhere. By 206, Hannibal was virtually a prisoner, in strategic terms, in what was left to his southern Italian province, and when Scipio undertook the invasion of Punic Africa in 204, the grand strategy was in ruins. The best that Hannibal and Carthage could now hope for was to defeat the homeland's invaders and try to salvage a compromise peace. But at the Battle of Zama in October 202, Scipio's generalship proved more than equal to the Carthaginians. The war terminated Carthage as a great power. Her territories in North Africa were left to her, but nothing beyond. A heavy war in North Africa were left to her, but nothing beyond. A heavy war indemnity was imposed, the navy was burned, and any future war, even within Africa, required Roman permission. On her western border lay the now united kingdom of Numidia under a ruler of Genius Massinissa, who enjoyed all the favor from Rome that Carthage could never earn, and who had designs on Punic territories. Yet, helped by political and financial reforms that Hannibal enacted as suffete in 196 to 195, and because it no longer had naval and large military costs, the much buffeted republic regained prosperity in astonishingly short order. Despite Massinissa's provocation, Carthage embarked on 40 years of peaceful growth and wealth. The victors did even better, of course. Far more than the First Punic War, the Second made Rome an imperial state. Not only was Cisalpine Gaul reconquered and southern and central Spain taken over with immense profits, but the Romans could once more direct their attentions across the Adriatic. A decade and a half after Zama, every Eastern great power had been taught a hard lesson in the superiority of Roman arms, and had learned that their unfettered days of Hellenistic rivalry were over. Roman domination, potential if not always exercised, extended from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. Hannibal was there to see it, for he lived until 183. It was an ironic outcome to the grand enterprise that had started with his epic march across the Alps 35 years before, but the memory of that enterprise has remained vivid and instructive to this day, and much of this is thanks to Livy's artistry and devotion.